Brown, and a professional power eater. Who knew there was such a thing? Right now she's chowing down on a monster banger in a bun. We'll talk to her and have all the details. You can watch us live on the RNZ website and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. Race Relations Commissioner Meng Foon has resigned after failing to disclose a conflict of interest. The Chief Human Rights Commissioner wrote to the government last month outlining the undisclosed conflict. Mr Foon had been the director of a company that received government payments this term. These included more than $2 million for accommodation, including emergency housing. Associate Justice Minister Deborah Russell had been considering the matter with a preliminary view it was serious enough to remove him from the role. She says Mr Foon resigned before she reached a decision. Waikato student leaders have written to the Ministry of Education and the Minister, urging them to find a solution with striking teachers. More than 35 Waikato student leaders have signed the letter saying they support the teacher pay claim and are worried about their education. Deputy Head Girl Anna Jago says they want an end to the industrial action. You can hear more about this on Checkpoint shortly. A long-awaited new stretch of motorway between Puhoi and Warkworth, north of Auckland, will soon be open to the public after an 18-month delay. More than 135,000 vehicles are expected to use the road every day, but authorities aren't saying exactly when it will open to avoid congestion from eager motorists. Waka Kotahi's Brett Glidden says it will open in coming days.
We just don't want people lining up waiting. It gets unsafe, especially at the southern end when we've got a motorway that's in full operation. We've got a few things we've got to tidy up and finish, so we're not quite there yet. But we just say to people this is going to be here for 100 years, plenty of time to drive it. You don't have to drive it on the first day.
The Prime Minister cut the ribbon for the Puhoi to Warkworth motorway today. National is concerned the government is rushing through its tax principles legislation in order to take a capital gains tax policy to the election. The bill establishes a regular reporting process to check in on whether New Zealand's tax system is fair against a set of principles. But Parliament's own Legislative Design and Advisory Committee said the bill's policy objectives could be achieved without legislation and was cautious of the speed it was passing through the House. National's revenue spokesperson Andrew Bailey says tax legislation shouldn't be rushed.
Clearly they have a view that they must have it in place prior to the election, and no doubt it's going to be used for political ends during the course of the election.
Andrew Bailey says the government should withdraw the bill and start again. The mother of a teenager who received a permanent eye injury on a school trip says she feels there's a culture of failing at Worksafe. Kathy Voiles' son Jack was hit in the eye when a slingshot snapped at Team Up Events Rotorua Centre in 2019. Ms Voiles says Jack lost 92% of vision in his left eye, but Worksafe said it wouldn't prosecute because he hadn't lost all of his sight. She says the family had to send an Official Information Act request to Worksafe to find out they'd closed their investigation after Team Up Event said the injury was Jack's error. The family won their private health and safety case against the company this week. Payments service provider SmartPay Holdings says a ransomware cyber attack has stolen some Australian and New Zealand customers' information. The company says it's been working with security specialists and government authorities since the attack last Saturday. It says it's taken steps to protect the integrity of its payment systems, which continue to operate normally. And police say there are no reports of injuries from a crash involving a school bus and a car in North Canterbury. The crash was reported near Sefton at the intersection of Broad and Hulston roads shortly after 3:30 this afternoon. The road is closed. To sport now, and despite being without 8 All Blacks, the Crusaders coach Scott Robertson is bullish about his team's chances in tonight's Super Rugby semi-final against the Blues in Christchurch. The defending champs have been plagued by injuries this season and will be without the likes of All Blacks Sam Whitelock, Ethan Blackadder, David Havili and Joe Moody. Robertson's named an unchanged starting lineup from last week's quarter-final victory and is confident of keeping their unbeaten home finals record intact.
Any Crusader team that's named will rise up to the occasion. It's going to be a hell of a weekend. It's got that feeling about it, isn't it? It's the crowd, the milestones on both sides are huge, so it's just one of those games you want to play in.
The Crusaders have won all 29 of their playoff games at home. Americans Ricky Fowler and Xander Schauffele share the lead after a record-setting start to the US Open at Los Angeles Country Club. The pair carded the two lowest rounds ever at a US Open with 8 under 62s. New Zealand's Ryan Fox has made a strong start with a 2 under par 68, which has him in a 12-way tie for 14th. And UFC fighter Conor McGregor has been accused of sexually assaulting a woman after an NBA Finals basketball game in Miami last week. It allegedly happened at the same game where McGregor hit the Miami Heat's mascot during a halftime promotional stunt that went wrong. McGregor's denied the accusations. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Isabella Allende's latest book is an appeal for empathy and understanding for the plight of migrants and refugees. Dr. Justin Gregg wonders whether we should be so proud of human intelligence when it causes us so much misery. And Jenny Wynn on her sports bra, the first bar in the world devoted to screening women's sport. Ko Kim Hillaho, join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You are with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. In Northland, showers, some heavy. Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Rain with some heavy and possibly thundery falls, mainly about Coromandel and Bay of Plenty west of Edgecombe. From Waikato to Taumarunui, also Taupo, mainly fine with high cloud but patchy rain at times. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloudy with a few showers. Periods of rain tomorrow, heavy and possibly thundery at times. Taranaki and from Taihape to Wellington, mainly fine today. High cloud tomorrow with a few spots of rain from the afternoon. Fiordland and southern Westland, scattered rain, clearing tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of Te Ika Maui, the South Island, generally fine. Cloud increasing, or I should say Te Waipounamu, as the locals say it. Generally fine. Cloud increasing in the east from Marlborough to Dunedin tomorrow with scattered rain. And Dea Kohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few showers, clearing tomorrow morning. I will have traffic news and headlines at 5:20.
Kia ora rā iho. Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Race Relations Commissioner Meng Foon has resigned over an undeclared conflict of interest. Our political reporter Katie Scotcher joins us now. Katie, what more can you tell us?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, we got a statement a short time ago from the Associate Minister of Justice, Deborah Russell, confirming that Meng Foon has resigned from his role as Race Relations Commissioner, and it appears he's resigned before he could be removed from that job. As Russell says that on the 12th of May, the Chief Human Rights Commissioner wrote to her and advised her that Meng Foon had failed to declare a conflict of interest, which he is required to do in that job. It's not clear yet how the Chief Human Rights Commissioner became aware of Meng Foon's failure to declare that conflict of interest. Now, the conflict itself, Meng Foon has a company, he directs a company, and that company received income from the government during his time in the role, which he failed to declare. And it's not an insignificant amount. It includes over $2 million for the provision of accommodation, including emergency housing. Now, while he was receiving those payments, Meng Foon was involved in a Human Rights Commission inquiry into emergency housing. Now, the Crown Entities Act, which kind of oversees people like Meng Foon in the position that he was in as the Race Relations Commissioner, requires him to disclose their conflicts of interest. This is to deter the real or perceived conflict of interest and to uphold public confidence in decision making. Now, we're told that the Human Rights Commission board produced a report after it learnt of this failure to declare the conflict of interest, and in that report it found that he breached his duties under the Crown Entities Act. Now, the Associate Justice Minister, Deborah Russell, says that she sought advice from the Ministry of Justice after that board report, after reading that. She says just 2 weeks ago she wrote to Meng Foon inviting him to respond to the board's report and explained that he could be removed from office. She then met with Meng Foon. Deborah Russell says that her view was his actions were serious enough to warrant his removal from the job. She says, quote, "Had the process been completed, it is probable I would have determined his actions represented a serious breach of the Crown Entities Act, and I would have taken the next steps to recommend the Governor-General to remove him from his office." But we have learnt this evening that he has resigned before that could happen.
Katie, as you mentioned, Deborah Russell is the Associate Minister for Justice. Kitty Tapu-Allen is the Minister for Justice. Why isn't she dealing with it?
Yeah, well, usually it would be the Justice Minister who would, deal with the Race Relations Commissioner, but in this instance it is Deborah Russell, and that's because of a situation that was unfolded or became revealed to the public earlier this year to do with Kitty Allen and Meng Foon. So Meng Foon and his wife donated $1,500 to Kitty Allen in 2020, I believe, for her campaign for election on the East Coast, and that donation was declared in 2021. A company that he is a director of also provided Kitty Allen a rent subsidy. We're told that, or we understand that Kitty Allen had nothing to do with his appointment in the role of Race Relations Commissioner, but that was, I believe it was Andrew Little at the time in 2019, but updated her conflict of interest after these donations were revealed in the public domain to include her connection to Meng Foon. So since that has all become public, Associate Minister Deborah Russell has been dealing with Meng Foon.
Thank you so much for that update, Katie. That is Katie Scotcher, our political reporter. And just hot off the press, reading this from a phone, seeing it for the first time, we have a statement in from Meng Foon that says, "I informed the Prime Minister that I will resign on the 18th of the 6th and let the Minister Deborah Russell know this Sunday formally with a letter to her, but the news has beaten me," says Meng Foon. "This was my conversation with the Secretary of the Minister of Justice this morning. I will resign on the 18th, and I resign for my error of judgment on political donations and our company as an emergency housing provider. I declared we are an emergency housing provider before my appointment in 2019. I refute strongly that I didn't declare my interest of emergency housing to the Human Rights Commission and the Ministry of Justice." He goes on to say, "As they received my interest before I was appointed and before I took on my role as the Race Relations Commissioner." That in part is the information he says he passed on to the Minister in that response from Meng Foon that just arrived at Checkpoint a couple of seconds ago. Stop using our learning as a pawn. That is the message from a group of Waikato student leaders who have written to the Ministry and Minister of Education calling for an immediate halt to industrial action that's seen them miss hours of learning. The Post-Primary Teachers Union and the Ministry are locked in a bitter pay dispute. In the meantime, union members are refusing to teach 2-year levels per day, 4 days a week, until the end of the term. And if it's not settled soon, some classes could be out for term 3 too. More than 35 Waikato student leaders signed the letter, and they say others around the country have also offered their support today. The students support the teachers' pay claim, but they say they feel stressed, are struggling to catch up work and may not make NCEA deadlines. Year 13 student and spokesperson Anna Jago is the deputy head girl at Cambridge High School. Here she is reading some of what they wrote.
To the Ministry of Education, on behalf of all rangatahi, we want to say that enough is enough. The greatest detriment to our future as NZ students is educational disruption. While you battle over pay and conditions, students across the country are being sent home. Yet again, our learning, despite all the rhetoric to the opposite, is happily being used as a pawn for political and union conflict. What kind of message are you teaching us about compromise, about valuing one another, and about working together towards a common goal?
So tell us how you and other students are feeling at the moment.
The general feeling amongst all students is just a bit of frustration. We've kind of had enough, like we say in the letter.
And why have you had enough?
It says in there that we've had 3 years of disruption, and this is our 4th, and this time there's not going to be reduced passing grades or anything like that. And it's just, we want to be at school, we want to be learning, we want to be doing our assessments so that we have a positive future, we can get into university. And it's just, yeah, it's lasted a little bit too long.
What do you feel you're missing out on at the moment? And I mean, you might have some examples from your own study. What are you missing out on and how is it affecting you?
I know there are a lot of students who have internal assessments that have had to be dropped altogether just due to the lack of time at school. But in terms of me, just there's not enough time. We're trying to learn externals and you can't learn things. It's really, really hard to learn things from home. You can work on things, but learning is the hardest bit without your teachers there.
And do you feel stressed about that?
Yeah, definitely. Stress is a major thing amongst all students. It's something that we've, as head students, noticed in our school bodies.
Yeah, tell me a bit about that. What does that look like for students when they feel stressed?
I think it almost ends up being a lack of motivation because it all feels like a little bit too much. I mean, most of us are still just kids, I guess, don't know how to handle stress as a whole. So it, definitely equates to a bit of a lack of motivation.
Do you reckon you can catch up, Anna?
It'll be difficult. Next term's going to be crazy. If this continues into next term, I don't think we will.
And what do you think about the possibility that could happen if there's not an arrangement that the sides come to over the pay and all the rest of it? This could go on into term 3.
I just don't think that's something that can happen. That's why we, as a group of student leaders, we wanted to speak out, because if that happens, it's not going to be possible to catch up in the time frame.
Do you think teachers should get paid more?
Yes, definitely. They do so much. They do so much more than just, your teaching. They're there, they're asking you how you are every day. I get teachers, you're walking past them, they give you a smile and a wave. They do so much more than just their teaching that I guess is unpaid work. But their profession is so important. We say that in the letter, that it's teachers that almost control the future of New Zealand, you could say, because it's the students who are the next generation of everything, of leaders of the country. So, they have one of the most important jobs in the world.
Do you think that deadlines for your assessments, that they should be pushed back, that you should be given more time? How do you feel about that?
That is definitely something that has helped in the past 3 years. It would be good, especially if it was to continue into next term. I don't know if that will happen due to the circumstances, but it would help.
What about extra credits? Because obviously during COVID, there were special arrangements made. Do you think you're getting to the point you might need that because of the strikes?
It is something that they'd have to start considering very soon. Because, especially with things like your internal assessments being dropped, that could be 4 or 5 credits that are just out the window.
I'm curious, how many days have you been in class this week?
Only 2.
What?
We had Year 13 strike on Tuesday and on Thursday, and then today in the Waikato was a teacher-only day for field days, which was set a while ago. So 2 days in the classroom this week.
Are you worried that some people will fail NCEA because they've missed classes?
There's definitely some students who will not achieve as well as they possibly could because of these. And the stress I was mentioning earlier, the lack of motivation, that's something that doesn't just come back instantly. It's something that will continue on throughout the year. It's a feeling that's been set so early on, and it'll definitely impact some students.
So what do you need to happen? What is your message to the people sitting at the table trying to sort it out?
We want the strikes to stop. We want the teachers to get paid what they're worth, and we want to be back in the classroom, and we want to be learning.
And Anna and her fellow school leaders have started a petition calling on the Ministry of Education to end the strikes. It's got more than 600 signatures so far, and if you want to check it out, it is on change.org online. 18 minutes after 6. Let us know your thoughts on that, 2101, or tweet us at checkpointrnz, the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Do stay with us. Kia mau tonu mai. The ribbon's finally been cut on a new stretch of motorway north of Auckland after an 18-month delay. The Puhoi to Warkworth link was dubbed the Holiday Highway when Labour was in opposition, but its ministers were there to open it today. More than 135,000 vehicles are expected to use the road every day, but authorities are not saying exactly when it will open to avoid congestion from keen motorway enthusiasts. The 18.5 kilometre road, not 1,000, 18.5 kilometre road, still has some finishing works to be completed over the next few months. Amy Williams and cameraman Nick Monroe got a sneak peek.
Driving through the winter mist and rain, this new motorway shaves 10 minutes off the travel time between Puhoi and Warkworth. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins opened the road in a ribbon-cutting ceremony this morning.
We're missing a vital implement.
Who has some scissors?
Does anyone have any scissors?
When the motorway opens to the public in coming days, Waka Kotahi General Manager of Transport Services, Brett Glidden, says it will make a huge difference.
It's going to make a massive difference for Northland and for this community north of Auckland. It's a much more resilient route, and we've already seen this year the existing state highway's been closed several times. It's a much safer route.
Together with the Matakana Link Road project, the new stretch of motorway will allow those heading to Matakana and the coast to bypass a 5-legged intersection in Warkworth called Hill Street, where traffic backs up and up.
We won't have to talk about Hill Street again because traffic will get to bypass it and use the Matakana Link Road, so it will make a huge difference to Warkworth. It's a very frustrating intersection and it has been for a number of years. We're pleased that we can finally bypass it.
It's a road Labour dubbed the Holiday Highway while in opposition, but it's not anymore.
I think we were wrong to call it the Holiday Highway. I don't think the criticism that all of the funding was being directed into roads of national significance and away from maintenance and away from local roads was wrong.
Auckland Transport Chief Executive Dean Kimpton says that bypass will be crucial for traffic flows.
Thousands of cars, yeah. So it'll really free it up and allow people to move more quickly, which is exactly what we expect.
About half, say? Reduce it by half, do you reckon?
Yeah, in the order of half.
That's quite a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's significant. People enjoy the difference.
Chris Hipkins says the route will provide better access to markets in Northland, as well as to export ports at Auckland and Tauranga. He says further improvements to roads north of the motorway, such as at Dome Valley, are on the cards.
There's further decisions obviously still to be made around that timing and funding, further decisions still to be made around that. But we certainly acknowledge the vital importance of this section of road. Linking Auckland, the Auckland region, to the Northland region, this is the main lifeline, this is the main highway. We need to make sure that we're investing in it.
But alongside delays, the cost of the motorway has ballooned from $650 million to the late $800 million mark. Associate Transport Minister Kiri Allen says the exact number is still being worked out.
There's been some additional costs that the government has made, which has made it to just in excess of $800 million, but the final rounding out, we'll have further details on that once the full project's been done and dusted.
The motorway is a public-private partnership. This manager for the project, Jonathan Green, works for Fletcher.
Recently we've looked back at old photos and videos of the early days, and it sort of reminded us how far we've come.
Yeah, and what's it like driving along?
Wonderful, yeah. Some safe, big sweeping corners. It's beautiful. I like to say that it's like Northern Gateway on speed.
The Puhoi to Warkworth motorway is expected to open within days, but Kiri Allen won't say exactly when.
In due course, not too long. I'm not allowed to give you a final details just because Waka Kotahi says that it does increase the chance of people coming up and causing some disruption. But I can say it's very, very soon.
And Brett Glidden from Waka Kotahi isn't giving anything away.
We've got a few things we've got to tidy up and finish, so we're not quite there yet. But we just say to people this is going to be here for 100 years, plenty of time to drive it. You don't have to drive it on the first day.
the long-awaited motorway, ready for rubber to hit the road.
It is 23 minutes after 5. If you're listening to that on radio, do check out the video version. It'll be on our webpage. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaro, do send us your feedback. You can get in touch on text 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. I would love your thoughts on anything you've heard on the programme. Meng Foon, the Race Relations Commissioner, has resigned from his position, and some Waikato students have written to the Ministry of Education. They want a stop to the strikes, concerned about the effects on their education. It is time to go to the headlines now. Evie standing by. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Race Relations Commissioner Meng Foon has resigned after failing to disclose a conflict of interest over government payments to a company he oversaw, including $2 million for accommodation. Associate Justice Minister Deborah Russell had been considering the matter, but Meng Foon resigned before she reached a decision. Waikato student leaders say they're getting national support after calling on the Ministry of Education to solve the teacher strikes that are costing them hours in the classroom. They say they support the post-primary teachers' union's pay claim, but the upheaval means they may not make NCEA deadlines. Cambridge High School Deputy Head Girl Anna Jago told Checkpoint that students have had enough. After an 18-month delay, the Prime Minister's cut the ribbon on the 18.5-kilometre Puhoi to Warkworth motorway link north of Auckland. But authorities aren't saying exactly when the $800 million route will open, as they want to avoid congestion from keen motorway enthusiasts. National says the government's rushing through legislation so it can take a capital gains tax policy to the election. The bill establishes a regular reporting process to check whether the tax system is fair, but a parliamentary committee says that can be done without new legislation. And the Coronet Peak ski area near Queenstown saw a turnout of about 800 people this morning as it opened its lifts for the start of the season. Ski area manager Nigel Kerr says although the snow is a bit scarce, it hasn't dampened enthusiasm. And speaking of which, we have a report for all of you motorway enthusiasts about the traffic. You'll be pleased to know you can enjoy your roads carefree because there isn't apparently any unusual congestion.
Thank you so much, Evie. It's time to ramp up fines for overstayers in Auckland street parks, according to the city's transport agency. Central government sets the fines, but they haven't gone up in nearly a quarter of a century. Auckland Transport says that means in some cases it's cheaper for motorists to park up for endless amounts of hours and just cop the ticket. While Mayor Wayne Brown joins us now. Kia ora, Mr Mayor. Lovely to have you on the programme.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
How much do you reckon parking tickets should be?
Well, it's more to the point that the council should determine what the penalties are, not a parliament in Wellington. Aucklanders need to be able to... We're grown up enough, we're a third of the country. We'll not only set our parking charges, we should set the fines as well. It's completely pointless that the parliament in Wellington set the fines, which makes it meaningless for us to set the parking levels, because if the fines are so low, why would you pay the parking charges? And I've got councillors wanting us to increase revenue, but basically it's cheaper to park and just pay the fine.
Any suggestion that Parliament will hand that power over to you?
I've got plenty of suggestions that they should hand that over to me, plus a few more.
But are they going to do it?
Pretty sure they might, because there's an election coming up, and I've got it on a list of things that I want them to do. The other thing for the light rail project, within the assumptions for that one there is the fact that they will be doing some form of time of use charges on the motorways and roads, and that legislation, it actually says that Auckland Council put that in place, but we don't have the legislative power to do that. But they are actually considering to give us that, and at the same time the parking. They want us all to get reduced car use, but it's only $12 parking fine in Auckland if they're not paying. It's the same as in Gore, which is recently famous by its mayor, but I don't think Gore has quite the same parking pressure that Auckland does. So we need to be able to make our own decisions. I stood on getting Wellington out of Auckland. and I intend to proceed along those lines.
Does a $12 ticket, which is the lowest, it's the cheapest amount you can get fined for overstaying in a car park. So does a $12 ticket wash its own face in terms of the costs in using the staff and issuing the ticket and collecting the money? Does it wash its own face?
Well, worse than that, it's not a great encouragement for people to bother paying the parking cost in the first place.
How much should it be?
It's a problem.
How much should it be? Because New South Wales, you'll know all of this. You can get pinged $120 for a parking ticket in New South Wales, $70 in Brisbane, Victoria $92.
Yeah, well, it should be around $100, so that if you think, I may as well pay the parking charge. And you can put the parking charge up a little bit in places where it's, even the council parking charges is generally less than if you go to Wilson's or perhaps down at Britomart. The parking charge down there is more than the cost of what you buy when you're parking.
Hey, while we've just been talking, someone wants to know about mobility parking offenders, people who park in car parks that are meant for people with mobility issues. $150 apparently is the ticket for that. What do you think that should be?
Well, I've got no sympathy for people who do things like that. That's if you're going to park in somebody's mobility things, then you're a bad person. And so I'd like to, that's the sort of stuff that we should be doing consultation on. I'd say that if we ask the public, they'd feel really we should make those people immobile. You're a bad person if you're going to park in a park which is there for a person who has mobility issues.
You've got some big bills, you mentioned that. How much revenue do you get from parking fees and fines?
It's quite substantial. It's in the 40 to 50 million, a year, but it could well be more, and other cities, it's quite a generator of income, but it's not so much to be a generator. It's supposed to be a generator of change of behaviour. If we are supposed to be getting everybody to use public transport, we've got to encourage them.
Hey, Wayne, while I've got you here, the joint buyout of flood-damaged houses in Auckland, what percentage of that bill do you reckon the government should pick up?
Well, we're a long way short of sorting that out, yes.
But you'd have some ideas, I reckon. You'd have some ideas what you think is fair. Can you give us a sort of percentage that you reckon would be fair?
Well, it's more complicated than just that. I mean, there are various different categories. If you've built on top of a cliff, you knew there was a cliff there. I'm not particularly keen that we should give them anything. But if you've built in a valley which you didn't realise was going to flood and it got flooded, then there's a possibility that we should be contributing. But and conversely, in other cases, sometimes the council has said no to the subdivision there, and then the developer's gone off to the Environment Court and been overridden. Perhaps we should sue the judges. It's quite complicated, and simplistic answers to complicated questions is not a good way to solve it. So we are having a slow series of discussions with the government who have more pressure to rush at it than I have because they've got an election coming up.
Good to talk to you. Good to talk to you, Mr Mayor. Really appreciate you coming on the program. That's Auckland's Mayor Wayne Brown there. Now, history was made during the opening round of the US Open at Los Angeles Country Club. America's Ricky Fowler and Xander Schauffele both shot a round of 62, the lowest rounds ever recorded at the major, known as the toughest test in golf. The duo are tied at 8 under, 2 shots ahead of the rest of the field going into the second round. We're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. You'd be as good as that at golf, wouldn't you? Okay. Ryan Fox also playing at his 5th US Open. How's he going?
Well, it's his 3rd major of the year and he's had quite a strong start. As you mentioned there, quite a low-scoring round all across. He's had 3 birdies and a bogey for a 2 under par 68, which has put him in an 11-way tie for 14th. It's not too bad. He's part of this tournament, which is also being played against the backdrop of the Live PGA merger. The first time that this has all come together is these players after the announcement of it. So for those maybe who were thinking of putting together these teams. They've had Rory McIlroy, who's obviously been the face and the voice of the PGA against the LIV players, and then they've also had LIV's Bryson DeChambeau. They've been partnered together for this, which is also maybe a little bit of theatre involved in that. So Rory's had the upper hand here. He's 5 under and tied for 5th, and DeChambeau's a couple of shots back at 3 under for 7th. And I guess this is one of those tournaments where, as well, the PGA players don't actually play at this LA Country Club. It's playing on the North Course. It's the first time it's hosted a major. So it's quite surprising to have seen what the results have come through for today. Ricky Fowler had 10 birdies, which is pretty good on a course that he wouldn't have played on very often. So that's obviously helped him get right to the top of the leaderboard there.
And the final 4 teams left standing in Super Rugby Pacific. Now they take the field this weekend. What can we expect from the semi-finals?
Yeah, semi-finals kick off tonight with the Crusaders hosting the Blues, which is that rivalry, and I think the players have played into it a little bit this week, throwing around terms like bad blood, boys from the city versus boys from the south. It's obvious that the Crusaders have a bit of a dominance in this. They've won the last year's final, which was obviously between these two teams, and they've also won 2 games during the round robin of this year as well. They're expecting, the Crusaders captain Scott Barrett said that he was expecting a bit of niggle and verbal barbs from the visitors, maybe to throw them off, try and get the 11-time champions a little bit rattled ahead of this game as well. But he's also saying that the bragging rights for this as well. I mean, the Blues are probably going to need to do a little bit more than throw around some cheeky sledging to the boys as well to get a result. But also talking about mentality, the Brumbies have brought in a psychology coach before their game against the Chiefs tomorrow. So the Brumbies have won Super Rugby titles before, but they haven't won a playoff in New Zealand. No Australian team has. So again, they're trying to get rid of the hoodoo in New Zealand by bringing in somebody to get their winning mindset together, according to their lock, Tom Hooper. So yes, calling in a different coach to try and hopefully get themselves through to the final next week.
Thank you, Felicity. Sports reporter Felicity Reid there. We'll get to some of your feedback now. A lot of it coming in on the industrial action from high school teachers. This listener says, cynical rostering home, preserving own pay while others pay, find other tactics to pursue worthwhile goals. Inflation is going down. Nobody mentions 12 weeks holiday, not all spent working, and flexibility out of school working time, a bonus for parents and teachers. I'm horrified that some parents are bleating so self-righteously about the teachers' industrial action, this person says. Focus your indignant fury at the Education Ministry. The teachers don't have much choice regarding the impact, same as when doctors and nurses are forced to go on strike. Peter says, my 14-year-old granddaughter has not had a full week this term due to teacher-only days, strikes and sick days. And this one too, as Year 13 students, we aren't allowed to even be on school property when we are rostered home. So during those days, we don't have access to our schoolwork, or especially art students don't have access to our art boards, as we cannot take them home. 2101 on text if you would like to join that conversation. Also interested in your thoughts. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown, $100. He reckons is a pretty fair parking ticket. If you overstay, you're welcome. What do you think? You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 24 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time to go to the business news. Nona has snuck into the studio. Ko taku hoa I nai nei, ko Nona Peltier. Nona, sustainable aviation fuel. Work is underway to get this going. What are we doing? Saving our potato peels? What's the plan?
Yeah, it's a bit like that. Potato peels probably is something that you would probably throw into that. It would be anything that's carbon-based. So they're looking to use solid, well, first of all, let's just say where it started from. So Air New Zealand is partnering with the government in a feasibility study. They're going to spend $2.25 million to see whether or not it's viable or feasible to produce sustainable aviation fuel here in New Zealand. Now, this is something that's available in other countries, and we import it, but we can't get enough of it, and it's really expensive. It's about 3 to 5 times more than a regular fossil fuel aviation fuel. So jet fuel. So the government is going to partner with Air New Zealand. They're going to see whether or not it's feasible to produce a consistent supply through solid waste and forestry waste. So I guess the slash, that sort of thing.
Consistent supply is important when you're chugging your way 17 hours across the ocean.
Well, it's a consistent supply so that, it will meet the needs of our targets, so the zero emissions and so forth. Now, Qantas is also working on the same project. They announced that earlier this week while they were in New Zealand to launch their New York flight. And they're thinking that they're going to produce it there and maybe even export it to New Zealand. So if we can't produce it here, perhaps we will be able to get it from Australia. But it is an expensive exercise. What Greg Foran was saying was that it has to be cost effective. We've got to be able to do it competitively. Otherwise, what's the point? And also we have a supply. Like you would think we have enough rubbish to make it work, but maybe not.
Energy sector is being challenged to present alternatives to this multi-billion-dollar Lake Onslow plan.
Yes.
What's that about?
Well, I don't know how many people are familiar with the Lake Onslow proposal. This is one that the government is pushing quite hard. It's going to cost $15 billion estimate. Now, we always know that when you estimate something, it usually costs more, but $15 billion is not small change for sure. And it's a lot of controversy over it. I mean, some of the energy sector leaders are not supportive of it. And what it is basically a storage lake so that in dry hydro years, lakes you'll have this to back it up. Okay, well, fair enough. The Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, Simon Upton, had commissioned a report that wanted to look at, well, how did it stack up? And stacked it up against, believe it or not, this green hydrogen project we've heard a lot about. He's saying that one definitely didn't stack up. But the Lake Onslow does in terms of smoothing out volatility in those dry years and making sure. But it's not going to be cheap, okay? We're going to have to pay for it for like 100 years. So, I mean, well, energy sector experts suggest that we should be doing something else, but they haven't fronted up with any other alternatives. So what the commissioner is challenging them is to use the same framework he's used in his report to compare their ideas with the Lake Onslow project. If they think they got a better idea, it's going to work better, it's going to be cheaper or whatever. But then he also said that, well, the market likes volatility, so maybe they don't really want to have a deal.
All right, running shoes on for the markets.
Running shoes. Okay, well, look, I'll tell you, we had a really great day. The top 50 index, it just kept rising all the way into the afternoon. We finished up 1%, a gain of 113 points to 11,800. Very positive. The New Zealand dollar was a touch stronger against the US at 62.3 US cents. Otherwise, it was steady at 90.6 Australian, 48.8 British pence. It's always stuck there, isn't it, Lisa?
Yeah. Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier there with Business News. 19 minutes away from 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Don't forget, if you want to get in touch about anything on the program, text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie standing by with the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown says parking fines in the city are too low and make no sense. He suggests a ticket should be around $100. Central government sets the fines, but Mr Brown told Checkpoint that responsibility should be handed over to the council. He says at the moment it's cheaper to park and pay the fine. The Prime Minister says Labour was wrong to call a long-awaited new stretch of motorway north of Auckland the Holiday Highway while in opposition. More than 135,000 vehicles are expected to use the 18.5-kilometre road between Puhoi and Warkworth daily. Chris Hipkins cut the ribbon today, and although there's no definitive opening date, it will be in coming days. A New Zealand man has been deported from Thailand after police there found 2 ecstasy pills on him late last year. But Ari Salinger's family say they are waiting for an airline to approve him as his visa expired while he was on bail after authorities confiscated his passport. A month-long dahui has been placed on Medlands Beach at Aotea Great Barrier Island after a sand dune collapsed on 2 boys, fatally injuring one of them. 12-year-old Levi Sonchai Goloboski's life support was turned off yesterday at Auckland's Starship Hospital. And a salvage team searching the Yellow Sea has retrieved part of a North Korean rocket. It's thought to have been used to launch Pyongyang's first military satellite last month. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Wellington, State Highway 2 is partially blocked at Silverstream northbound at a crash site north of Ferguson Drive. Pass with care and expect delays as northbound queues are presently back to the Haywoods interchange. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Evie. A professional eater has just taken on a 3-foot or 91 centimetre American-style hot dog, complete with hot chips stuffed in a chunky bun at a Wellington eatery. It's making me hungry. American Katina DeJarnett, who goes by the stage name Katina Eats Kilos, hoovers up massive quantities of food while racing the clock. And she travels the world doing it. So far this week, she has chowed down on a massive bowl of beef noodles, practically a bucketful in Queenstown. And then there was the whopping waffle stack in Christchurch. And Katina joins us now, fresh off her latest feeding frenzy. Katina, how are you feeling? Have you got indigestion?
I'm feeling pretty good, especially after that rum-offy shake that I enjoyed. But no indigestion, thankfully.
How do you do it? Because the hot dog, if we take that for an example, was an absolute whopper, 3 foot. I mean, what's your approach?
Yes. Basically just get really, really hungry beforehand, although I kind of had like a not so strategic meat pie about a couple hours before the challenge, but that was unusual.
So your strategy is what? Do you barely eat anything during the day if you're doing a food challenge, or do you eat proper meals? How does it work?
Typically like a small breakfast and then maybe a snack if it's like a later challenge later in the evening. But typically we're pretty trained just from doing so many challenges back to back. So I'm pretty trained from doing the waffle challenge that we just did down in Christchurch. So that was like roughly 2.5 kilos of waffles, which was a pretty good stretch in my tummy. So I was feeling pretty good, ready to take this one on today.
How long did it take you to get through that hot dog?
So the hot dog itself took me about 14 minutes and 50 seconds, but I came up short on the fries. There was a kilo of fries underneath that thing, and so I wasn't able to quite get those in time. I was pretty tired by the end of that, so I had a lot of room though, so I did enjoy chugging a nice boozy shake at the end.
So basically the fries broke you today?
They did, unfortunately, they did. And normally I really like my fries.
Why do you do it?
I'm a pretty competitive person, actually. So I actually got my start way back in 2019 doing a bodybuilding show. And I had actually been watching YouTube while I was dieting, just in order to, I guess, live vicariously through people. And I started watching people professional or competitive eating online, and I decided, why not give that a try after my bodybuilding show? Took a camcorder to my first small challenge. It was really easy, wanted dessert afterward, and so just kept filming bigger and bigger challenges, and I've been hooked ever since.
Do you actually make a living from this? Is this your job, your profession?
Yes, as odd as that sounds, it is. I'm very blessed and lucky. I get to travel the world, meet great people, and promote restaurants, and that is my job.
And so where are you headed to next, and what will your next big meal be?
We're actually heading up to Auckland next, and we have a few challenges lined up. We're doing one at Broadway Diner, I believe on the 20th. Don't quote me on that date, but I believe that is the first day that we're doing a challenge in Auckland. If there's any confusion, feel free to check out www.randysantelschedule.com. Randy Santel is my partner, and we both travel doing this together.
Really good to talk to you, Katina. Thank you for joining us. That is Katina Eats Kilos, and boy, she eats kilos. Go online, check out the size of that thing she ate. Evie couldn't believe it. A ginormous American hot dog, a kilo of fries she was attempting, the bun, the works, and then she chugged back some kind of drink afterwards. Absolutely.
That hot dog looked like a section of bowel.
Oh, no, it was awful. Anyway, it is 13 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Stuart Nash has been cleared of any other major transgressions in a report he and his boss hopes will draw a line under the saga. The Cabinet Office launched the inquiry in March after Stuart Nash was fired for discussing confidential cabinet matters with two of his donors. Mr Nash and the Prime Minister Chris Hipkins may hope the report brings the matter to a close. It is not over just yet. Here's our Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch.
As the Prime Minister sheltered from the Auckland downpour this morning, he was forced to reflect on the political storm which saw him sack Stuart Nash just months ago.
I regard Stuart as an honest and decent person who's made some mistakes.
A report back today has found no further mistakes by the Napier MP, like those that cost him his job, but does recap his earlier cascade of calamities. In March, during a live radio interview, he basically boasted about breaking the rules, admitting he'd once called up the cops to complain about a court case, a ministerial no-no.
I phoned up the police commissioner and said, surely you're going to appeal this.
It began a spiralling descent for the puffed-up police minister as Stuart Nash deflected.
I'm not interfering in any way, shape or form.
Dug in.
So I was chewing the fat with a guy who was a mate.
And doubled down.
And I stand by my criticism of that decision.
By day's end, though, he finally accepted his demise. He resigned his police portfolio.
I own it, made a mistake, and onwards and upwards.
But from there, it was only downwards.
Government Minister Stuart Nash is in more hot water tonight.
It is an unbelievable dereliction of duty.
Why does the Prime Minister believe he's capable of doing those other portfolios?
Last night I was made aware of a further situation involving Stuart Nash. I've decided that an appropriate penalty is to demote Stuart Nash and to place him on a final warning.
And then came the final and fatal offence. Email correspondence came to light showing Stuart Nash had spoken out of turn to two donors, laying out the positions of his ministerial colleagues, a breach of cabinet confidentiality.
Stuart Nash has fundamentally breached my trust and the trust of his cabinet colleagues. His conduct is inexcusable.
Chris Hipkins requested an official review of all Stuart Nash's communications with donors. It's found no further offences of that same type. The Cabinet Office did identify one conflict of interest it says could have been better managed, but decreed it lower level offending. The Prime Minister says he's pleased there were no other major breaches, but maintains Stuart Nash still had to go.
He clearly didn't follow the rules as he should have in some areas, and he's paid a price for that. He's not a minister and he's standing down at the election.
Stuart Nash declined to be interviewed by RNZ, but in a statement said he hoped the report would draw a line under the matter. There's still one outstanding question, though, and that's whether the MP effectively covered up the incriminating emails several years earlier when a reporter lodged an Official Information Act request. The Ombudsman is investigating the case now, and National's Simeon Brown says until those findings are released, major questions still hang over the government.
We've had minister after minister, whether it's Michael Wood, Kitty Allen, Stuart Nash, others, who have time and again ignored the rules, and it seems to appear that they think they're above the rules.
The Ombudsman says he is finalising his investigation and will report back shortly. Then, perhaps, an end to the storm, or maybe another deluge.
AA is running a Nominate a Mate campaign to help fill a driving instructor shortage. Qualities and qualifications: a responsible and careful driver, passionate about education and road safety, and of course, patience in spades. Successful candidates and the mates that nominate them could win hundreds of dollars in prizes. AA Driving School General Manager Roger Venn joins us now. Kia ora, Roger. I know no one who fits that description. Sorry.
Oh, that's a shame. I'm sure there's somebody that can fit it. We can make a room for them. But yeah, we're looking for somebody with a bit of road safety passion, who wants to run a small business and wants to work with the trusted brand in that space, really.
So why the unusual approach? How hard is it to get people to do this?
Yeah, it has been tough. I mean, I think we're all struggling like most businesses in terms of attracting new resource, and this is just a new fun way we thought we might generate some interest. So even if you're not interested yourself, perhaps you know somebody that's fantastic with their driving, with their interest in road safety. Maybe they're good with young people, and maybe they want to give back to their community. But we thought we'd try a new approach, and if you're successful and we take the instructor on board, you're both winners.
Hey, so what exactly does the job entail?
Well, being a driving instructor has many facets. Our model is that it's a small business opportunity, so we run a franchise operation. But most of your customers are learner drivers in that sort of 16 to 25 space. But we also have other opportunities to work with our fleet and business clients to deliver our DDC courses as well. So it's a small business, but it's great because it's flexible. You can choose your own hours. You open up your calendar to when it suits for you. But the main thing is you've got to have an empathy for the road safety piece or for your local community or for your local youth. And it's a real way of giving back to the community whilst earning a good living and running a small business.
So, Roger, which areas are the biggest deficits
We're looking nationwide generally, but we do have some urgent demand in certain areas, for example, Dunedin, Nelson, the Waikato, Wellington, Wanganui and Takaroa as well. But really we're expanding nationwide because we're struggling to meet demand for our members and customers.
So have you got people queued up for lessons?
Yep. Yeah, unfortunately in some areas of the country, at sort of peak times, after school, you can't get a lesson for 4 to 5 weeks, and that's not really a service we want to give to our members or our customers. So we're hoping to address that.
I know people will probably pick a job like this for the love of it, but what kind of money do you make?
Oh, well, that depends how busy you want to be. But some of our top instructors that work 6 days a week and do 6 or 7 lessons a day are turning over $150,000 a year. Our average instructors are grossing about 120. And even if you only want to work 5 days a week, you can still turn over 100,000 a year and take home 70,000 as a bare minimum.
Well, but you need nerves of steel, don't you, Roger?
Oh.
Nerves of steel.
No, I would say patience and a can-do attitude. And remember, you're in a dual-controlled vehicle, so you've got a brake pedal on your side. So you've always got a chance to take control if you need to.
Hallelujah. Thank you for joining us, Roger. That's Roger Venn, the AA Driving School's General Manager there. Farmers going to field days is like going to the mall for city slickers, all the bells and whistles you can dream of. But with the country now in a recession, are farmers actually buying anything? Sally Murphy checked out what's on offer at Mystery Creek.
Dairy farmer Harry van der Ven and his family travelled from Taupō to nab some of the offers at field days.
We're looking for a generator for power cuts. We also unfortunately, we had a couple of our motorbikes stolen off our property over the 12 months, so insurance has just come through, so we're looking for a motorbike. Unfortunately, we had one of our tractors catch on fire, so, there's another reason why we're here to have a look at tractors and things like that. So, yeah, we're out just seeing what's out there, see what we can buy at the most cost-efficient price.
And he wasn't the only one looking at tractors. Sales manager at CNH Industrial, Dave Knowles, says after lower sales last year, things are on the up, with a dozen large tractors sold already.
Sales have actually been pretty good this year, surprisingly. We thought they would be more suppressed than they are, but we've done a number of tractors off the site, which is a wee bit of a litmus test. We run a few field day specials as well, which is nice. And I guess, look, to be fair, it's there's no show without customers, is there? And yeah, it's been a good show. The weather's probably played part of that too. But I think people have missed Mystery Creek. It was 2019 since last winter, Mystery Creek.
The ultimate salesman, he showed me the tractor generating the most interest.
This guy here's our biggest one. It's the Optum 300. She's a beauty. And to be fair, a contractor's going to use that and do a lot of work on farmers' properties.
An Optum, right? Yeah. So this is a huge red tractor. The wheel is taller than you and I.
It's true, yeah.
How much is this going to set me back?
Well, you'd be probably heading towards the 400,000 for one of those, yeah.
Dave Knowles says for many, money is tight, but not for all, with some parts of the primary industries doing well this year. Down the road at Stranraer Fencing Supplies, Stu Tyler is feeling upbeat about sales.
First half of the first day was good. Probably not as good as some other years, but certainly better than it was in November last year.
I was going to say people have less money to spend this year. Are you noticing that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a bit harder to push the sale or to push the upsell, but we're still seeing a bit of throughput, which is great.
And what are people buying?
It's pigtail season, so they're buying lots and lots of pigtails. There's a bunch of stuff around hand tools and different other on-farm reels and the likes for electric fencing as well.
So a few tractors and plenty of fence supplies headed out the gate, but the most pumping sight, as always, was the Swanndri tent. Green, blue or red, they had it all. But General Manager of Sales, Nick Floyd, says sales are more subdued.
So we've noticed that transaction-wise we're maintaining similar sort of levels to what we'd usually achieve, but consumers are certainly orientated around achieving more of a bargain or that sort of price orientation in their purchases. So we're seeing people going for the slightly more entry or that sort of in a good, better, best sort of proposition. People are making do with what they can. So yeah, we're seeing the average transaction values are a little bit below where we usually see them at the event.
So I asked what people are spending their hard-earned cash on.
Well, it's always the wool product, the heritage product, but probably the the biggest one that's grown for us in the years has actually been dog coats at the field days. We will sell out of the dog coats, and it's really cool when you see the matching dog coat and jacket going through, and you know that they're going to be walking around their neighbourhood in those pieces. It's pretty cool.
The festival for farming folk wraps up for another year tomorrow.
Let's get to some of your feedback now. We had Mayor Wayne Brown on the program earlier this evening talking about parking fees. He reckoned it's time to ratchet them up in Auckland, and he wants the Auckland Council to have the power to set those fees, not government. Sam's got in touch and says, an interesting comparison in the parking fine debate. The fine for not paying on public transport is more than 10 times the parking fine, $200. Which modes are we trying to encourage people to use again, says Sam. Interesting point. Terry says, Wayne Brown's just admitted that parking fines are a source of revenue collecting. Yes, indeed he did. 50 million, but it could be more. Another says, what a surprise. Mayor Brown won't front up on floods, but he will on parking. Petty, they reckon. Paul's got in touch to say Brown should do more interviews. I found myself surprised to be agreeing with him with a lot of what he said. Sure, says Paul. On the teachers' strike, in our interview with Anna Jago, a Year 13 student who says that they want the strikes to end, their learning is suffering and the ministry should settle with the teachers. This person says she's an example of why the voting age should be reduced to include her immediately. That in from Richard. Another person says, so good to hear from a secondary student affected by the teachers' strike. Good on the Cambridge High School student, being very articulate about the impact on student learning, only at school for 2 days this week, and she was concerned about her fellow students too. Come on, the Ministry of Education. Teachers have also got in touch about the student who said they couldn't access their art portfolio. They're saying you can enter the property to collect your portfolios to work on.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Paul Mardier, good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. Meng Foon, who has just resigned as Race Relations Commissioner, insists he declared his conflict of interest to the Ministry of Justice and the Human Rights Commission. Mr Foon says he declared it before he was appointed in 2019. He says he didn't think he needed to declare the conflict during the Human Rights Commission inquiry into emergency housing. Mr Foon says in hindsight he made a mistake. He says he's resigning as his company is an emergency housing provider and because of political donations he's made. Waikato student leaders have written to the Ministry of Education and the Minister, urging them to find a solution with striking teachers. More than 35 Waikato student leaders have signed the letter, saying they support the teacher pay claim and are worried about their education. Deputy Head Girl Anna Jago told Checkpoint they want an end to the industrial action.
We've had 3 years of disruption, and this is our 4th, and this time there's not going to be reduced passing grades or anything like that. And it's just, we want to be at school, we want to be learning, we want to be doing our assessments so that we have a positive future, we can get into university.
A school bus and car have crashed in Canterbury, northwest of Christchurch, leaving several people injured. Emergency services went to the intersection of Broad and Halston Roads in Waimakiriri just after 3:30 this afternoon. Rangiora High School Principal Bruce Kearney says 6 students were on board at the time.
The students on the bus have all gone home. One is going into hospital just for some precautionary checkups, and they're okay. Our bus driver has been injured a little bit and is getting checked out as well.
Police say the people in the car are injured but haven't commented on the severity. A long-awaited new stretch of motorway between Puhoi and Warkworth, north of Auckland, will soon be open to the public after an 18-month delay. Waka Kotahi says it will open in coming days, and more than 135,000 vehicles are expected to use the road every day. The General Manager of Transport Services, Brett Glidden, says it'll halve traffic through a congested intersection in Warkworth.
We won't have to talk about Hill Street again because traffic will get to bypass it and use the Matakana Link Road, so it will make a huge difference to Warkworth. It's a very frustrating intersection and it has been for a number of years. We're pleased that we can finally bypass it.
Brett Glidden says they're not saying exactly when the road will open to avoid congestion from motorway enthusiasts. Payments service provider SmartPay Holdings says some of its Australian and New Zealand customer information has been stolen in a ransomware cyber attack. The company says the attack happened last Saturday, June the 10th, and it's been working with security specialists and government authorities as part of its response. Nona Peltier has more.
SmartPay says it is continuing to investigate the theft and has taken steps to protect the integrity of its payment systems, which continue to operate normally. It doesn't collect or store individual cardholder information or details as part of its transaction processing. SmartPay says customers do not need to take any action, as it will be contacting those affected directly.
Tropical cyclone Bipajoi has made landfall in the western Indian state of Gujarat with winds of up to 125 kilometres an hour. Cities and villages along the coast of India and Pakistan are being lashed with rain and storm surges. Roads are blocked with uprooted trees and electricity poles. 2 people have been reported dead. The police describe a sand dune collapsing on 2 boys on Great Barrier Island as a tragedy. A 12-year-old boy who had life support turned off yesterday has since died, and his friend remains in a critical condition in Auckland's Starship Hospital. Sally Wenley reports.
It was a sunny winter afternoon on Sunday when the dune collapsed on top of the pair who were playing on popular Midlands Beach. 12-year-old Levi Sonche Golabuski's body has been returned home today and his school is closed. Locals on the island are in shock and the church has opened its doors to anyone who wants support. The police have extended their condolences to the boy's family and friends and are investigating on behalf of the coroner. A month-long rahui has been placed on the beach and Levi's funeral is next Tuesday.
The Auckland Mayor says the government should hand back to council the power to set parking fines. Currently, the minimum parking fine in Auckland is $12, but the Mayor says it should be around $100. Wayne Brown told Checkpoint council should be able to determine the fine levels.
We'll not only set our parking charges, we should set the fines as well. It's completely pointless that the Parliament in Wellington set the fines, which makes it meaningless for us to set the parking levels, because if the fines are so low, why would you pay the parking charges?
The central government hasn't increased the fine levels in a quarter of a century. And many residents of storm-damaged Muriwai on Auckland's west coast did not want the council to reopen public road access today, but say it fell on deaf ears. The area was devastated by multiple landslides earlier this year, with 2 volunteer firefighters killed by a slip. Today, Auckland Council reopened one of 4 cordoned areas to general traffic. Muriwai Stickered Residents Group spokesperson Mike Hibbett says it's already causing bottlenecks for everyone.
The community feeling is definitely that it's too early. We did a survey and the majority of residents think that it's not a great idea at all. The main points are really around the fact there's only one road that's able to be open.
Mike Hibbett says queues are likely to occur and it will be more sensible for the council to wait until both access roads are repaired. That's the news.
This week on Music 101, Richard Langstone joins me to celebrate the music that came out of the South Island, New Zealand in the late 70s and 80s. The Teskey brothers chat to me and give us ticket giveaways for their upcoming New Zealand shows. And author and illustrator Gavin Bishop is my guest on the mixtape, picking his favourite songs. Music 101 with me, Charlotte Ryan, this Saturday from 1 p.m, right here on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. For Northland, showers, some heavy. Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, rain with some heavy and possibly thundery falls, mainly about Coromandel and Bay of Plenty west of Edgecombe. Waikatotu, Taumaru Nui, also Taupo. Mainly fine with high cloud, but patchy rain at times. Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloudy with a few showers. Periods of rain tomorrow, heavy and possibly thundery at times. Taranaki and from Taihape to Wellington, mainly fine today, high cloud tomorrow with a few spots of rain from the afternoon. Fiordland and southern Westland, scattered rain, clearing tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of the South Island, generally fine. Cloud increasing in the east from Marlborough to Dunedin tomorrow with scattered rain. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few showers, clearing tomorrow morning. The time is 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Ngā mihi, Evie. No mai hoki mai. This is Check. Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Almost 2 years after the first of two devastating storms caused widespread damage to Marlborough Sounds, the council has released its preferred repair options. It's suggesting road access be reinstated across the majority of the Sounds, but in the Kinipuru, it says a balanced approach between rebuilding roads and creating marine infrastructure is needed. Now it wants to hear from the community. Samantha G has more.
Some communities in the Marlborough Sounds still have restricted vehicle access, thanks to storms last year and the year before. A video released today summarising the options for repairing the storm-damaged roads.
The estimated cost of the repairs for the 5 emerging preferred options is $160 million.
The council explaining its proposal and potential funding options.
While we hope that the government, through Waka Kotahi, will fund much of this, Marlborough ratepayers will be asked to contribute, and that could be a significant proportion of the cost.
Mayor Nadine Taylor says with cost estimates in the hundreds of millions, it wants feedback from the community.
Certainly in my time as Mayor, this will be the most significant decision the people of Marlborough will have to make, and that's around how do we move forward with the fixing of these roads, with the roading recovery, and how do we pay for it.
More than a third of that $160 million to be spent in the severely damaged Kinipuru Sound. Transport Recovery Advisor Steve Murrin says the aim is to try and restore vehicle access to the area.
We're not going to have a 2-lane road like that was there prior to the storm event, but there will be a number of single-lane sections. Some of the corners will be quite tight. The designs we're doing for the repairs, you will be able to get a truck and trailer around these corners, but they won't be able to stay in their same lane. So we're probably going to be able to get truck and trailer units in there, but they're more than likely going to need to be piloted as they go in and out.
The council is suggesting a balanced approach to repairs in the Kinipuru, build back some roads, do essential repairs on others, and invest to make marine transport more available and resilient. As it stands in the proposal, the cost of the repairs will be spread across all Marlborough ratepayers. Council Chief Executive Mark Wheeler says that's up for discussion.
Blenheim residents will benefit from tourism visitation in the Sounds, so there's an argument that at least some of the cost can be shared, but should it be all of the cost?
The proposal also includes funding for adaptation to prepare for future storms, earthquakes and sea level rise.
The hazard adaptation pathway has a lower capital cost but a longer term benefit, so marine access generally is what's proposed there. But it does have quite a high ongoing maintenance cost, so that has to be weighed up as well.
Waka Kotahi has already committed $140 million in funding to Marlborough since the storms. Director of Regional Relationships Emma Spate says with increasingly severe weather events around the country, many regions are in need of financial support to repair road infrastructure.
We've been really clear that the previous funding at 95% is not sustainable, that we do see our partnership with Marlborough as really important, but that we have to consider the affordability across the country as a whole.
7 community sessions will be held over the next 2 weeks in the Marlborough Sounds, Picton, Blenheim and Nelson. A survey seeking the public's feedback on the proposal is open until July 11.
Up to 100 children may have been on board the overcrowded fishing vessel that sunk off southern Greece. At least 78 people have already been confirmed dead in one of Europe's worst migrant disasters. Greek television says 9 people, including several Egyptians, have been arrested on suspicion of people trafficking. The BBC's Nick Beak reports.
Relatives of the hundreds feared dead raced to the port, fearing the worst. We found Aftab from Wolverhampton, searching for news about his cousins from Pakistan.
My relatives were on the boat that capsized.
How do you know that?
We've had confirmation that we found one of the relatives is in there, but the rest of them we haven't got hold of yet.
How many relatives?
There's 4 of them.
The victims of Greece's worst ever migrant shipwreck had set off from Libya. Many Syrians were on board, Qasim Abu Zaid told me, including his wife.
Like, how would I feel? I lost my wife now. I don't know where is she now. So of course, it's my wife.
We went to meet Dr. Makaris. He treated 30 of the survivors, who told him that dozens of children had been on board.
One told me about 100,
children. The other told me about 50. So I don't know what is the truth.
Lots of children.
Lots of children. This is the conclusion.
Hanging over this tragedy is one simple question. Should the Greek authorities have done more to save those on board? The Coast Guard says the migrants didn't want their help, a claim that's been challenged. So we've been trying to piece together exactly what happened in this disaster that seemed to unfold in slow motion. At around 8 a.m. on Tuesday, the Greek authorities are first informed about the fishing vessel. The Coast Guard has first contact at 11 a.m. and claims it doesn't request assistance. A little later, an emergency helpline for migrants in trouble at sea receives multiple distress calls, including one at 3:20 p.m. saying the captain has left the vessel. The migrant boat has no publicly available tracking data, but BBC Verify has used a ship monitoring website to follow the movements of boats in the area that offered assistance. At 3 p.m, Greece sends a nearby commercial vessel, the Lucky Sailor, to the migrant boat, supplying it with food and water. Tuesday evening, a Coast Guard vessel sails near the fishing boat and from a distance apparently concludes there was no problem with its navigation. But less than 4 hours later, the migrant boat overturns and sinks. The Greek authorities, as well as fending off criticism, have been making arrests, up to a dozen. But who was really to blame for such a huge loss of life is now being fiercely debated.
Deranged and absurd, that was Boris Johnson's take on the parliamentary inquiry into lockdown parties during the pandemic. The report found that the former UK Prime Minister committed repeated offences and deliberately misled Parliament, while his political opponents labelled him a discount Trump. In a blistering statement, he branded the committee a kangaroo court. The BBC's Chris Mason reports.
So many chapters of Boris Johnson's life have his relationship with the truth running straight through them. Today, the latest chapter, a committee of his peers throwing the book at him. Was he honest about what went on in Downing Street during the very COVID restrictions he'd imposed on the rest of us?
All guidance was followed completely during number 10.
Really?
There was no party and that no COVID rules were broken.
A senior civil servant, Sue Gray, investigated. So too the police. Today, another page turns. The conclusion? Devastating for Mr. Johnson. Let's be blunt, this report concludes that he lied. It says he deliberately misled MPs, he deliberately misled the committee. He breached their confidence by saying out loud what was in their report before they did, and that he was complicit in a campaign of abuse and attempted intimidation of the committee. Look at what else the committee had to say. It takes aim at the frequency with which he closed his mind to the truth. And it said some of Mr. Johnson's denials and explanations were so disingenuous that they were deliberate attempts to mislead.
Is this the end, Mr. Johnson?
We're shouting at Boris Johnson because he said no to an interview. He put out a written statement instead, claiming the report is rubbish, a lie, deranged, absurd and complete tripe.
Have you run out of road?
And he said, I do not have the slightest contempt for Parliament or for the important work that should be done by the Privileges Committee. It is for the people of this country to decide who sits in Parliament, not Harriet Harman.
You have been there and seen it with your own eyes.
Harriet Harman is the Labour MP who chaired this investigation. He claims she was prejudiced against him from the outset, given things she had previously said. The report says its members were informed by the facts. What do you make? Jacob Rees-Mogg was knighted by Boris Johnson and served in his cabinet. What did he make of the report?
Well, I think it's overbaked. That I think they want to find the worst at every possible opportunity. And I think it shows a degree of vindictiveness that does not work to the committee's favour or advantage.
Is this the end for Boris Johnson? No way back from this, is there?
There's easily a way back, because the great virtue of our system is that Parliament can chuck you out, and it can chuck you out again, and it can suspend you, but if your voters send you back, back you come.
Today's report came out at 9 a.m, but the Prime Minister managed to find himself in front of the cameras earlier than that, wanting to look like he's getting on with the job on an immigration raid in West London.
You're talking about a report that I haven't seen and no one else has seen. It wouldn't be right to comment on it in advance of it coming out and being published.
So we're going to hand you over.
So he didn't fancy saying very much, but little tongue-tie from the opposition parties today.
Boris Johnson is not only a lawbreaker but a liar. He's not fit for public office and he's disgraced himself and continues to act like a, pound shop Trump in the way in which he tries to discredit anybody who criticises his actions.
He's built his entire career as a politician on being very shady with the truth, and what the committee has found is that he purposely lied to Parliament as Prime Minister.
Today, the final page turns on the former Prime Minister, COVID rule breaking and the truth. The big question is whether the book is now closed for good on Boris Johnson.
Right, back home, a traffic update in Auckland. A crash is blocking all lanes southbound between Oniwa Road and the Auckland Harbour Bridge. Waka Kotahi says avoid the area or expect delays until it's cleared. 19 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A former Kiwi women's magazine editor has fronted up on CNN saying sorry to Harry and Meghan. Alice O'Connell, who used to be editor of New Zealand Women's Weekly, has admitted to publishing untrue stories. After the Duke of Sussex took the Mirror newspaper to court, she wrote an open letter reflecting on her own treatment of the 38-year-old prince.
A rare apology tonight, one that's coming from someone in the magazine world, and it's directed toward a frequent target of the press. That's Prince Harry, the former editor of New Zealand's Women's Weekly, a magazine that heavily covers the royal family, is now sharing her regrets in a newly published letter. Alice O'Connell writes in part, "I published some stories that were unfair and incredibly one-sided. I can now see they were from sources who weren't telling the truth. My biggest mistake, though, was that I stopped seeing Harry as a human being." Alice O'Connell joins us now. Alice, thank you for joining us. You have said that you owed a genuine apology to Prince Harry for quite some time. Why are you coming forward now?
It felt like the right time. It's been about 3 years since I was the magazine editor, and I think that having that time has given me some perspective, and I've been able to reflect on the role that I played in all of this. But I think in the meantime, I've just been increasingly frustrated by watching the media coverage of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and just how, in my opinion, how unfair, how distorted, how often just quite mean and spiteful that coverage can be. And I've hoped that maybe a reporter or a news organisation might take a step back and look at the way that they have covered the royal family, particularly Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and look at how they have in the past, how they are now, whether it's justified or whether they might need to course correct. And I thought, why keep waiting? Why not just do it myself? The royal family have a real hold on us in New Zealand, that we are part of the Commonwealth, and so they have sort of been a big part of our society for more than a century in the terms of the media. And I think it's kind of like how we do with celebrities, that we can put them in a bubble, that they live in a whole other world, that they're not like us regular folk. And I think I got caught up in that and the churn of that news cycle, and stopped realizing that this was a real person who never asked for this life, who was born into it, who we've scrutinised since he was just an embryo, and has really not deserved the way that he has been treated by the media. And yeah, I think it made me feel like I need to stand up for him and look at what I've done in the past to be unfair to him also.
I wonder what you would say to them if they were watching tonight. What would you say about everything that's transpired?
Sure, I would say to keep going with what you're doing, and I'm sorry, as I've written in my article and capsule, that for what I have done and what I did when I was a magazine editor, and I'm genuinely sorry for that time. And but I think what they are doing of not staying silent about this and continuing to let people know what it's like out there, that they should continue to do so.
It sounds like something from a dystopian future or a Hollywood film or both. Singapore has deployed a fleet of so-called robo-cops across the city-state. As the BBC's Michael Bristow reports, they're not quite as intimidating as their fictional counterparts.
I think the first thing to make clear is that in people's mind they might be thinking about RoboCop, the science fiction film where you get this aggressive, able law enforcement agent basically willing to stop anything. Actually, it isn't like that at all, and I don't want you to laugh at this, but it looks a lot like a large wheelie bin. Essentially, it's 1.7 metres tall. It's got a camera on the top which can look 360 degrees. It sends information back to a control room where there's a flesh and blood officer sat there monitoring what goes on. And so it's basically observational. But the Singapore police does say it has what it calls interim intervention measures. These are basically flashing lights, speakers, a siren. So if something happens and this robot cop is around, it can alert bystanders to what's going on. It can even act as a kind of cordon to stop people getting near to something until a human police officer arrives. It seems to have gone down okay. Actually, they've been in testing in various guises for a couple of years, and this particular robot police operative has been tested for the last couple of months at the main airport in Singapore, going round and checking people out, leaving bags here and there and everywhere, and assisting the normal police in their job. So it seems that the police in Singapore are sensitive to that, and so they've introduced them gradually, and they're going to introduce them across the rest of the city-state in a progressive fashion, they say, so gradually, so people get used to them.
Now, we all know that Beyonce has serious star power, but it seems it's not just power over millions of fans. She even has the ability to raise the cost of living. The Swedish inflation rate was higher than expected in May, and economists are crediting the global superstar. The BBC's Rebecca Wood reports.
Get your money, 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 money. Don't be funny with my money, honey.
Don't be funny with my money, sings Beyonce. But maybe she has got a bit funny with Sweden's money. The country reported higher than expected inflation in May, and there are suggestions the global superstar could be behind it. Her world tour in Sweden last month sparked such a frenzy of demand for hotels and restaurant meals that it's shown up in the country's economic statistics. Michael Gran is Danske Bank's chief economist in Sweden.
What caught our attention a couple of weeks back was that we heard stories that all the fans coming here to Sweden were having problems finding hotels in Stockholm. Actually, they had to move further and further out in the suburbs. They bid up prices on hotels. So that is essentially the impact it had on inflation. It bid up hotel rates.
There is little doubt that the singer's first solo tour in 7 years marks a big economic moment. At least one estimate suggests it could gross more than $2 billion by the time it ends in September. Searches for accommodation in cities on the tour shot up after it was announced, and tickets for many concerts sold out within days. We'll have to see if future hosts also get what Visit Stockholm described as the Beyonce effect. But back to Sweden, where analysts predict the situation will return to normal this month. Although they might not be able to rest easy just yet. A quick search for concert tickets online, and it looks like Bruce Springsteen's heading their way in the next few weeks.
Yeah. They say the biblical road to hell is paved with good intention, but there's also a real paved road which leads to a Polish resort called Hell. This version of Hell, which is spelt H-E-L, is also served by bus route 666, the number of the beast in the Bible, and a marketing triumph for the Baltic town. But after fierce opposition from Polish religious conservatives, the bus company has rebranded the route 669. But what do local people think? The BBC's James Menendez talks to Alex, a resident of Hell, to find out.
I'm really surprised by it because I thought it was something that it was generally accepted by the community here, and it was a touristic attraction and that would never change. But I'm really disappointed, to be honest.
Touristic attraction. Do you think the fact that there is a 6-6 bus to your town hall has attracted many visitors?
It for sure has attracted maybe attention through social media. I think on Instagram, for example, a lot of people post pictures of the word hell because of the connotation with the place hell. And I think that the bus as well, they post pictures and they write about it. So I think, yeah, it has attracted some attention.
Now, the bus company says that it's had to change the number because it's come under pressure from some religious groups. What did people in the town feel about it? Were they bothered?
To be honest, I think the citizens of Hell are really progressive, based also on the electorate, if you see. So I don't think the people were bothered ever because of the number. I think maybe it is outsiders. I haven't really heard of anyone being bothered by it. I think that it was really something widely accepted. And I think that the people who know now that it will change, they will be really disappointed.
And that was Alex from Hell in Poland. Some more of your feedback before we head off for the weekend on our interview with Wayne Brown. Craig's got in touch to say, I find it interesting that Mayor Wayne Brown wants Wellington out of Auckland, but when he wants Wellington to bail out Auckland Council's flooding stuff-ups, he wants Wellington to bail him out and come back in. Oh, the irony, says Craig. On the subject of the teacher strikes and the students that have organised a petition, they want to go back to school and have classes, and they want the strike action to end, but the teachers to be paid what they're worth. This person says, I agree with the teachers. Well done for speaking up. Another says, I am a year 13 NCEA student and I have only had one full day of school this week. This from a teacher. I'm a first year teacher. My take-home pay is $750 a week after paying my student loan. I'm only able to do this because I have a partner to support me. Many would-be teachers simply cannot afford to be in this profession. That is all we've got time for. Have a fantastic evening and a wonderful weekend. We'll catch you again on Monday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, ngā mihi o te pō, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown wants the government to hand back to the council the power to set parking fines. He says a ticket should cost around $100. At the moment, the minimum fine is $12. Ming Foon, who has resigned as Race Relations Commissioner, says he made a mistake but insists he declared a conflict of interest